My name is Kevin. I'm 29 years old. What I'm about to tell you isn't just some weird experience. It's something that still messes with my head to this day. Out of everything I've ever been through, that night is the hardest to explain and the hardest to forget. I worked the night shift at a small rundown bar about 55 minutes from where I lived. Not the best job, but in a rural area you don't exactly get a lot of choices. So I took what I could get. The bar itself was nothing special, not busy, not dead either. Most nights passed without anything worth remembering. The night it all happened started like any other. I wiped down the tables, counted the register, then locked the front door. A routine I'd done hundreds of times. After making sure everything was secure, I got into my car and started the long drive home along a dark, winding country road. There were barely any other cars, no streetlights, just a strip of asphalt cutting through trees and empty fields. Usually the drive felt peaceful. Time to clear my head after a long shift. Sometimes I'd replay conversations with customers, sometimes I'd just drift off in thought. But that night, something felt off from the start. The fog rolled in thick. I could barely see more than 10, maybe 15 feet ahead. My high beams didn't help at all. The world in front of me looked like a moving white wall. I had to slow down, gripping the steering wheel tighter, every turn feeling like something unseen was waiting just beyond it. I started getting irritated. Tired, sleepy, and the drive felt longer than usual. About halfway home, something caught in my headlights. A pair of high heels, lying on the right side of the road. I slowed down as I passed them. The shoes looked clean, no damage, no mud, like they had just been taken off and dropped. No stopped cars, no one walking, no houses nearby. Just the shoes in the middle of an empty road. My stomach started to feel uneasy. I kept driving, trying to ignore it. About a minute later, my headlights swept over something else. This time, a woman's skirt and blouse, scattered across the asphalt, not far from where the shoes had been. It didn't look like they fell off a vehicle. It looked more like someone had taken them off while moving, or had been forced to. My chest felt heavy. Without realizing it, I slowed the car, my eyes cutting through the fog, searching for something or someone. But the road stayed empty, silent, no sound except my engine. And for the first time that night, the drive home no longer felt peaceful. I tried convincing myself that maybe the clothes I saw were just things that had fallen from someone's car. But the more I thought about it, the more wrong it felt. Too neat, too clean. Almost like they had been placed there on purpose, meant to be seen. The fog was still thick, the road still empty. I kept driving, trying to focus on the faint white line ahead of me. Then, my headlights caught something, a human figure, a woman standing on the shoulder of the road. I instinctively slowed down. She looked young. Her hair was long, slightly damp from the fog. Her body seemed to tremble. Against her chest, she held a baby wrapped tightly in cloth. One of her hands slowly lifted, waving weakly at me, asking for help. And that's when my stomach dropped. Her clothes were exactly the same as the ones I had seen scattered on the road earlier. I stopped a few meters in front of her. The engine was still running. My hands stayed on the wheel. For a few seconds, I just stared at her through the windshield, the glass slowly fogging up. Finally, I cracked the window open a little. "Are you okay?" My voice came out quieter than I expected. She walked closer. Her steps were unsteady but not panicked. The baby in her arms stayed asleep, face calm, like nothing was wrong. The woman looked at me. Her eyes were red, holding back tears that never fully fell. She said softly that she needed a ride to the nearest police station. Her voice was weak but clear. She told me her husband had done something terrible. My chest felt heavy, but this time not from fear, from sympathy. In my mind, she was a victim of domestic violence who had managed to escape. I unlocked the passenger door. She got in carefully, making sure the baby stayed comfortable. The door closed gently, and suddenly the car filled with a soft, expensive perfume. I started driving again. The first few minutes passed in silence. I tried to make light conversation, not pushing, just enough so she'd feel safe, but she kept staring straight ahead into the fog-covered road. Every now and then a tear slipped down her cheek. The baby kept sleeping peacefully, completely unfazed by the sound of the engine or the uneven road. Something felt off. Her clothes were clean, no mud, no bruises, no sign she had just been running through a cold, foggy road. But I kept driving. A few minutes later, she whispered softly, "My name is Olivia." I glanced at her for a moment. She gave a soft smile, even as tears kept falling. "I'm glad I met you, Kevin. You're a good man." My chest tightened instantly. I had never told her my name. My hands felt cold on the steering wheel, but I chose to stay silent. The road ahead was still swallowed by fog, and for some reason the air inside the car felt heavier. The drive continued in a silence that pressed in from all sides. The fog was still thick, the road still empty. Just the sound of the engine and the soft hum of tires on asphalt keeping us company. Olivia sat upright, staring straight ahead. The baby in her arms didn't move, still sleeping peacefully as if the world around it had never changed. About 15 minutes after she got into my car, a loud bang suddenly came from the front of the vehicle. The vibration ran all the way through the pedals. I instinctively slowed down and pulled over to the side of the road. "I'm gonna step out for a second," I said quietly. Olivia didn't respond. Her gaze stayed fixed forward, empty, distant. I stepped out of the car. The night air felt colder than before. Fog wrapped around everything. I checked the front, then underneath the car. Nothing. No damage, no object stuck, no explanation for the sound. Just silence. I opened the door and got back into the driver's seat, and the world stopped. The passenger seat was empty. No Olivia, no baby, no sound of a door opening, no sign anyone had ever been there. My breathing turned heavy, my thoughts fractured. For a few seconds, I just sat there, trying to understand what had just happened. But logic gave me nothing. In the end, I started the car again and drove to the nearest police station. The lights of the building felt like the only real thing in a night that made no sense. I went inside and told them everything, every detail, the shoes, the clothes, the fog, the woman, the baby, the name Olivia. Their reaction sent chills through my body. One of the officers stopped writing. His expression changed the moment I mentioned her name and what she was wearing. He stared at me for a long time, like he was making sure I wasn't joking. Then he stood up, opened a drawer, and pulled out a missing person photo. My blood ran cold. It was Olivia, the same woman who had been sitting in my car, but in the photo she was heavily pregnant, very pregnant, not holding a baby. The officer explained quietly that Olivia had been found dead 7 days earlier, in the same area I drove through that night. There was strong suspicion her husband was involved. Police were still searching for him. My legs felt weak. When I told them the baby in her arms had been sleeping peacefully, one of the officers closed his notebook, his face pale. "She never got the chance to give birth," he said softly. The room seemed to shrink. The sounds around me faded. My thoughts spun without direction. What I saw in my car couldn't be real. But I lived it. That night never truly left me. Since then, every time I drive alone down a dark road, I remember Olivia's smile, a gentle smile that looked peaceful, yet carried a deep sorrow, a smile I should never have been able to see. And somehow, it never felt like she was there to scare me. It felt like someone just wanted their story to be heard. like that short journey wasn't a coincidence. My name is Jacobs. Nothing really compares to the feeling of driving at night, especially on a warm summer night. The air drifted in through my open window, carrying that faint mix of asphalt and wild grass. The highway stretched out ahead of me, empty and endless, like it existed for just one driver. Where I live, nighttime changes everything. Streetlights stand far apart, other cars are almost non-existent, and the world feels slower. In that kind of silence, the engine becomes the only rhythm keeping you company. That night I was driving my uncle's BMW M2. The car always felt alive, even when cruising steady. I'm not a reckless driver, but sometimes I like to feel what a car can really do, just enough to feel the tires grip the road and hear the engine growl with power. Nothing more. I turned the stereo off on purpose. No music, no distractions. Just the sound of the engine and the night wind hitting my face. It felt like the whole world had disappeared, leaving only me and the road. A few miles passed without a single other vehicle, and in that silence a strange urge came out of nowhere. There was no clear reason. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't simple curiosity. It felt more like a whisper in my head telling me to leave the highway and take a smaller road, somewhere quieter, darker, more challenging. The feeling was too strong to ignore. I took the next exit. The small road greeted me with tight turns and shadows from trees that swallowed the sky. My headlights sliced through the darkness, forming a moving tunnel of light across asphalt and wild bushes. No houses, no cars, no sound except my own engine. I started driving more freely, taking each curve with precision. The tires squealed lightly now and then, just enough to send a rush of adrenaline through me. It felt like driving in an empty world, calm, silent, completely mine. Then without warning, something flashed ahead. My foot slammed the brake on pure reflex. The car jolted to a hard stop, tires scraping against the asphalt. My breath caught for a few seconds before I truly realized what was in front of me. Right there, in the middle of that narrow road, something was standing still. When my headlights fully lit it up, the shape became clear. A stroller, just sitting there alone in the middle of the road with no one around it. My engine was still idling low. I hadn't turned on the hazard lights yet. The road stayed completely silent. No footsteps, no rustling leaves, no sign that anyone had just walked away. Only the stroller, waiting in the center of the road. And for some reason, for the first time that night, the sense of freedom I'd been feeling turned into something much colder. I didn't know it yet, but the decision I was about to make in the next few seconds would change the entire night. The stroller didn't move. It just stood there, untouched by the harsh beam of my headlights. Seconds passed, and I remained behind the wheel, staring at it without moving. The road around me stayed empty, too empty for a place that should have been connected to nearby neighborhoods. My instincts told me to turn around and leave, but curiosity slowly took over. Something felt wrong, and my mind refused to let it go without an explanation. I shifted the gear into park and turned on the hazard lights. The soft orange blink became the only sign of life on that dark road. I opened the door and stepped out. The night air hit me instantly, warm, humid, filled with the buzzing of insects that now sounded much louder. My uncle's BMW M2 was still idling behind me, producing that low, steady hum, like a reminder that I still had a way out. My footsteps sounded too loud as I walked toward the stroller. Every meter felt longer than it should. I scanned the surroundings, searching for any sign of someone nearby. No moving shadows, no sound from the bushes, no lights from any house. Nothing. When I finally stood right in front of the stroller, I held my breath. I looked inside. It was empty. No baby, no blanket, no bag, no bottle, not even one of those small toys that usually hang from the handle. Just an old metal frame and worn fabric like it had been used for years and then simply abandoned. I stood there for a few seconds trying to process what I was seeing. An empty stroller in the middle of the road at midnight made no sense, and that lack of sense was exactly what made my chest feel tight. I looked left, then right, checking the surroundings again. Still silent. A dark field stretched along one side of the road while a thick line of trees stood on the other. Nothing moved. The uneasy feeling began crawling from my stomach up into my throat. I decided to go back to the car. There was no reason to stay there any longer. I stepped back, then turned fully and started walking quickly toward the driver's door. That's when it happened. Just before my hand touched the door handle, I caught a faint movement in the corner of my eye. Not the trees, not a small animal. Something moved fast, from the field beside the road. I turned toward it and my heart immediately started pounding. In the darkness of the field, more than one shadow was moving, and their direction was clear. Toward me. My body locked up. The night air that once felt warm now felt heavy, suffocating. I didn't wait to confirm what I had seen. Survival instinct took over. I turned and ran to the car, and faint footsteps began echoing behind me. I yanked the door open and dropped into the driver's seat. My hands were shaking, my breathing broken and uneven. In one reflex motion, I twisted the key. The BMW M2 roared to life. At the same moment, three figures burst out of the darkness of the field, running straight at me. Only a few meters separated us now. Two of them slowed just before reaching the car. One didn't. He slammed hard into the passenger side door. The sound of metal and body colliding was heavy enough to shake the entire car. His head nearly smashed into the window, but he didn't seem surprised, like he didn't even realize he had just hit something. I turned toward him. His face was only inches from the glass. Small eyes, red, veins crawling through them. His hair was messy and wet, stuck to his face. His clothes were torn apart, like he had forced his way through bushes or barbed wire. His face and neck were smeared with something dark, mud or blood. Maybe both. His expression was empty, not angry, not panicked, just hollow and deeply disturbing. Blood was running down his body, yet he showed no sign of pain. For a split second, we stared at each other, and every bit of confidence I had collapsed instantly. His hand suddenly grabbed the door handle. He yanked it again and again, trying to force it open. The movement was frantic, desperate, relentless. That was it for me. I snapped back to reality, turned the wheel sharply, swerved around the stroller still standing in the middle of the road, and slammed the gas pedal all the way down. The tires screamed against the asphalt as the car shot forward, leaving the three shadows behind, swallowed once again by darkness. I didn't slow down. The entire drive home, my hands kept shaking on the wheel. My breathing stayed heavy. Every time a streetlight passed across the windshield, the man's face flashed back into my mind. But behind the fear, there was another feeling I couldn't ignore. He was badly hurt. The blood I saw was too much, too real. I never went back to that place. Instead, I called the police and reported everything that had happened, describing that small road as clearly as I could. They told me they would send officers to check the area. When I finally got home, I parked and stepped out of the car and froze. Blood on the passenger side door, on the mirror, on the handle, even smeared along the rear panel. There was far more than I remembered seeing. A small dent sat in the middle of the door, barely noticeable, but the amount of blood felt excessive for such a brief impact. didn't make sense. The next morning, my uncle saw the car that had completely lost it. To him, there was only one fact. His car was damaged and covered in blood. My explanation didn't convince him at first. Only after the car was cleaned did he begin to believe that something truly happened beyond my control. Since that night, he never let me take his car out for late-night drives again. I kept replaying everything in my head. The stroller in the middle of the road, the empty side road, 3 figures hiding in the field. It all felt like a trap, a way to lure a driver out of their vehicle. That night, I was the target. They were just 1 second too late. The police never followed up. No report, no arrests, no explanation. Like the whole thing had simply disappeared from the real world. But one thing never disappeared. The image of that blood-covered man staring at me through the car window, and the feeling that I didn't survive that night because of luck, but because they failed by a single second. My name is Robert. This happened a few years ago, back when my life was almost entirely spent behind the wheel of a truck. I was a long-haul driver, and after years on the job, the silence of endless roads had become a normal part of my life. Empty highways, dark nights, and hours of driving without seeing another soul were nothing unusual to me. But there was one night that still feels real every time I think about it. That night, I was on the second-to-last run of a route across the state. Just one more stretch before I could finally head home, and my mind was locked on finishing the delivery as fast as possible. The road took my truck across a desert highway that was almost never used after dark. No towns, no gas stations, no streetlights. Just a narrow 2-lane road cutting through open desert under a sky full of stars. The diesel engine hummed steadily like the only living sound left in the world. The radio played nothing but faint static, and my headlights pushed into an endless wall of darkness. Trips like this always brought a strange feeling, like I was the last person left on Earth. I was about an hour away from the next drop-off point when the atmosphere started to change. At first, it was something small, something appearing out of the darkness behind me. A pair of dim lights, far back in my rearview mirror. Another vehicle. I didn't think much of it at the time. The highway was still long, silent, and empty, just like before. But without me realizing it, the quiet night was slowly turning into something else. Because that vehicle never really fell back. At first, I told myself it was nothing unusual. The presence of another vehicle on the highway wasn't strange, even out in the middle of the desert. But after a few minutes passed, something started to feel off. I glanced at my side mirror. A dark SUV was behind me, not too close, not aggressive, but still there. I sped up a little. It sped up too. I slowed down. It slowed down. For nearly 35 minutes, that vehicle stayed at the exact same distance, like a shadow glued to the back of my truck. The driver never tried to pass me, even when we crossed long, clear passing zones. At first, I thought maybe they were just nervous about passing a big rig at night. But the longer it went on, the less that explanation made sense. I tried to ignore it. I had a delivery to finish. But without realizing it, I kept checking my mirrors more and more. An uneasy feeling began to grow, the kind of feeling I almost never got after years on the road. At around 1:13 a.m., I decided to pull over at a small roadside rest stop. It wasn't a real rest area, just a patch of dirt with faded parking lines and a small shack with a vending machine inside. No lights around except for one weak bulb flickering above the machine. I planned to stretch my legs and let the vehicle behind me keep going. But before I shut off the engine, I saw something in my mirror. The SUV pulled in too. It parked at the farthest corner. The uneasy feeling I had before turned into irritation. I climbed down from the cab and walked quickly across the lot toward it. I wasn't trying to hide my frustration. But before I could get close, the SUV's engine roared to life. It sped out of the lot, kicking up dust and gravel in every direction, like someone fleeing a place they didn't want to leave any trace behind. As the SUV passed, I tried to see the driver. The windows were too dark. Within seconds, its taillights were swallowed by the desert night. I stood there for a long moment. Part of me felt relieved. Another part felt disturbed. That person had clearly been following me. And even stranger, they didn't want to be seen. After walking over to the vending machine, which turned out to be empty, I began to realize just how exhausted my body was. My energy was drained, and I wasn't eager to get back on the road. After everything that had happened, a short rest felt reasonable. I checked all sides of the truck, making sure the trailer locks were secure. Then I climbed back into the cab, leaned the seat back, cracked the window slightly, and tried to rest. The parking area was completely silent now. I don't know how long I slept. But about an hour and a half later, something pulled me out of sleep. A faint sound, footsteps, on gravel. I didn't move right away. My body stayed still, my breathing shallow. Years on the road had taught me one thing: don't make a sound until you know what's happening. Slowly, I peeked through the gap in the curtain, and there they were. 2 people. They were crouched near the rear wheels of my trailer. One of them held a small flashlight, pointing it low toward the ground like some kind of signal. They moved slowly, carefully, trying to open the trailer latch without making a sound. And instantly I understood. They were trying to break into my cargo. I wasn't carrying a weapon, I usually didn't. But that truck was my livelihood. When one of them pulled out what looked like bolt cutters, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. Without hesitation, I slammed the truck's air horn as hard as I could. The blast shattered the desert silence like thunder. Both men jumped in shock, then ran toward the bushes along the edge of the parking area. Less than 10 seconds later, headlights appeared out of the darkness. The same SUV. It rolled in without its lights on, paused for a split second, then whipped around and sped back toward the desert highway. Before I could even think about climbing down, it was already over. The silence returned. But this time it felt much heavier. I immediately called the police. They told me to stay where I was until officers arrived. Not long after, 2 patrol units showed up and inspected my truck with flashlights. They found fresh pry marks on one of the trailer locks. They had almost made it. The officers said incidents like this had happened on that route before. Cargo theft. They believed the SUV had been tailing me for miles, waiting for the moment I stopped somewhere isolated. That night I didn't lose anything, but the unease stayed with me. I kept thinking about how patient they were, how they followed without making a mistake, how they somehow knew I would stop there, and how many other drivers might not have been as lucky as I was. Since that night, I've never ignored a vehicle that stays behind me for too long, because on roads that look empty, sometimes someone is waiting, and not every journey ends as safely as it seems.